Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And Jason.
Hello, everyone.
So how's everyone's week going? Nothing too interesting so far?
Same old, just staying busy at work.
I heard you kind of got stuck in a little bit of a rut doing the same.
Yeah, it's this kind of work is just so monotonous, and
right.
You stare in front of a computer all day long. Your eyes begin to hurt. You
I've
get
been
up,
there.
you walk around, you go back to it, you get back, you start click buttons, click here, click there, fill this little blank, and
then heaven forbid if you miss one.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you go back, how did I miss that?
Right.
So yes, it's been one of them days, and it'll probably be that way for the rest of the week.
So when we get in these ruts, do we use energy drinks or do we use coffee?
Coffee.
How about you, Ian?
Coffee is definitely I have so many toys and paraphernalia that is coffee related. So I mean,
Are you a coffee guru?
I don't know about guru, but I mean, I have spent probably 4.5 years of my life as a barista, like working, like learning about coffee as like my job for a while.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't know what that means to you or if that anybody that's listening. So maybe that is.
I've always wanted to actually go to school for coffee just to get just a little bit better, understanding of different coffees and stuff like that. I think that would be very interesting.
It is an iceberg. There's just a little bit showing off the surface, but once you really get into it, you're like, oh man, this goes deep.
Well, in a past podcast, we were talking about Irish coffee kind of being the first bougie coffee, right? And this kind of sparked this whole conversation on coffee, and we just happened to actually have a guru with us.
Okay.
I'm a mediocre coffee kind of a guy. Out in my office, I've got multiple coffees, but I got a couple of teas too. I like Earl Grey tea. I get in the mood for that. But I like my coffee, especially first thing in the morning.
I don't discredit people that like tea as well. I can go both ways. I like tea or coffee, really.
But most people are either
one
or the other.
You're right. It's one or the other.
Very seldom do I see people drink both.
Right. My extensive knowledge does not go as deep into tea. There's again, just like coffee, it can be really complex and different with tea as well. And you'd be surprised.
Tea's just as involved.
Absolutely.
Right. And I know a pretty good bit. But not nearly as much as coffee.
There was a store, I think, called Teavana in the mall.
You're right.
At one time.
Yeah.
No longer exists.
Yeah, well, I think Starbucks bought them out. So
really?
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they got it like incorporated.
To take them out of business, or?
Oh well, no, to kind of up Starbucks' tea brand.
Okay.
So like they had Teavana teas now, but it did kind of shut down the standalone stores though.
Okay.
It's a hot button topic right there. The whole.
Oh really?
Yeah, because they kind of
controversy.
It's like the bigger amoeba or whatever that sucks up the small guy. Mm-hmm. It's all part of the same thing, but now you're just kind of like got dissolved into the rest of it.
You lose your identity.
Right. Exactly what kind of happened. It was its own thing, but then it got,
one of the fun things about this podcast is that we had another topic for tonight. And all of a sudden we were sitting here in the pre-show, and all of a sudden coffee came back up, and it just kind of took over the room.
You guys
and
asked me.
It was awesome. It was insanely awesome.
You guys asked me a good question, and then of course I was like, this is going to be a really involved answer. Is that okay? And you're like, well, let's go ahead and just talk about
we're
that.
learning a couple things.
Yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more about coffee.
Yeah, and Jason said, man, I'd love to go to school for coffee. And I'm sitting here going, wow, wouldn't that be awesome? How about we do a podcast on it? and Ian's like, hey, I could do that.
Yeah,
and Jason's like, I'm game. Let's do it.
Right.
One of my passions in life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean,
what are some of there's in life? Mm-hmm. There's rules for electricity. There's rules for steam. There's rules in life. Is there any kind of some basic rules that you need to follow for coffee?
Right. I was taught right off the get-go. I was taught there's 4 fundamentals for coffee. You need like a ratio, or I guess portion, however you want to call it. Grind, freshness, and water are like the kind of 4 pillars. So like the ratio or portion is obviously your ground coffee to water, and that could be There's like specific ratios online you can look at. Freshness obviously is how fresh the actual like ground coffee is, or whole bean. Water obviously is like how filtered or clean your water is. Or again, where we live kind of here in the South, we have soft water. More north, you have more like hard mineral water,
right?
Which is not really good for coffee, or it can be harsh in a lot of ways because those minerals really stand out. So like having softened water for that's like nicer.
Water, I think, is critical.
It is, because like with most things, it like with cooking, and you'll probably know this, Stoney, is like a lot of times the finished product is going to be as good as the stuff you put into it.
Right, absolutely.
So, and again, the two things that coffee is ground coffee beans and water, a majority more water than anything else. So besides like the portion being correct, the freshness of the water being right, the quality of the water, it's also the grind size. And that's where this is where people get really skewed with like how they make coffee sometimes, is like pre-ground coffee is really optimized for like a flat bottom like coffee pot. Kind of like, or like a coffee mate, whatever you want to call it. I particularly like French press, like my favorite. And that requires,
that's kind of bougie, right?
I wouldn't say bougie.
That is bougie.
That's kind of bougie,
Stoney,
right?
I think that's bougie.
That's kind of bougie. What?
I don't think you guys understand what bougie is.
With our grandparents.
That's kind of fancy.
Yeah,
right.
The percolators.
Oh,
what was that? Just canned coffee.
I mean, yeah.
Who can't remember their grandparents putting a little pot of the and it bubbling up at the top?
Yeah.
What went in that? What was the perfect for the? What did they just ground coffee?
I think they probably just would put ground coffee. That's more like a preparation. It's like that's another thing of like, but besides like your fundamentals of like making good coffee, it kind of also depends on like how do you want to make it? Do you want to make espresso? Do you want to make it like in a regular coffee pot? Do you want to make it French press? Do you want to percolate it? So like that's kind of like once you answer that question of how you want to make it is when you can kind of apply those fundamentals to it.
Well, you were hitting French press. Lay us down with the low. What's going on with French press?
So as long as you have like clean water and you have the right ratios of like coffee to water, I like French press because there's like two different methods. Like there's a handful of methods, but a lot of times there is like filtered coffee.
Okay.
And then there's like immersion coffee. So like the coffee is like fully immersed in the water that you're drinking, as opposed to like being like the water's passing through like a papered filter.
Okay.
So for French press, there is like a fine mesh sieve that is like separating the grounds of coffee from the actual like finished product. After you heat up the water and you pour it over the grounds, is when the brew happens. Okay. Just like in a traditional like
now,
basket.
Is this boiling temperature of water, or what's the prime water temp?
See, this is where we get really more into the. It also depends on the roast of coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
we're learning a lot. Wow.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So the darker roast, you don't want it completely boiling because of it can bring out more like harsh like notes.
Acidy parts?
No, not really acid, more bitter qualities and stuff.
Probably very organic flavors.
Whereas for lighter roast coffees, you want it like
because you want to pull out extra flavor.
Right. Because there's a lot of stuff that is involved. Same thing with like caffeine levels. The longer you roast coffee, like the more coffee gets extracted and the more caffeine gets taken out of it.
Oh, wow.
It's like dark roast coffee may have less caffeine technically as opposed to like lighter roast.
So how do they make decaf coffee?
There's like a process of like washing like the caffeine. Like I think there is a percentage of like caffeine. So decaf coffee is not 100% no caffeine. There is a method in which like you wash the caffeine out of the bean, like in the roasting process.
They had a show on what was it, the Learning Channel or something on how do they do that, and it showed the process of how you're like, how they get that much caffeine out of these beans.
Right, I want to say
I drink mostly decaf because
it's enough to put in pills. That's how they get the caffeine pills. They pull it out of there and they go straight to the caffeine plant where they make the pills. And you're like,
that's crazy.
How much do they get out of there?
I want to say now I could be really wrong, but I want to say it's as long as it's in like the 20% range, it's considered decaf. So if like the caffeine percentage is like 20% of what it was previously, like you've successfully made decaf coffee. So it's like I said, so and I think that varies between brands and beans and stuff. But to get back to the French press thing, if your grind is too fine, obviously you're dealing with a fine like mesh sieve in a way. So if it's too fine, it's gonna like clog it up, and it also the magic of coffee is like water contact with the ground coffee.
Is it kind of like the sonic ice gets your drink colder because there's more surface surface area than a chunk ice?
You're right.
Is that a dumb analogy, or is that
that's correct.
What about your quality of water? I want to kind of touch on this. What sort of water do you use when you make your coffee?
Because you don't want distilled water, right? You want some flavor in your water.
A little bit. I just use.
That's a good question.
I have I have a traditional filter on my refrigerator.
Okay.
And because we live in an area with like softened water, it's no big deal. But
if we lived up in Colorado where it was hard mineral
water here is, I think I checked last time, what comes out of the pipes is about 200 million parts per million of our drinking water now, which is a lot higher than what it used to be.
Right.
I think part of that is some of that saltwater intrusion starting to.
Right. The again, if I was in when I lived in Canada for a while, you can use like bottled water. That's not bad, but it does kind of take away some of the nice stuff out of water because I was in a place where like having softened water wasn't like readily available at some points. But I also had like a softened water like tap on the side of my.
Well, some of these homes in Canada and Colorado and Nevada, they have softened water systems on the house.
You're right.
Yep.
So they're really changing the composition of the water. I mean, at the molecular level, I'm guessing.
Right.
And that's got.
I drink that alkaline water.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I use, and when I do actually make coffee at home, that's the water I use.
I like spring water. I've noticed. I can't really tell the difference a whole lot, but I've noticed like spring water is kind of my go-to. But to kind of go back to what you were saying before about the sonic ice analogy, how I've always taught people is you to think of like grinding coffee, like water passing through sand or water passing over rocks. And with that is your coffee. So if you pass water, like for instance, if we're going to do a pour over, or we're going to pour hot water over ground coffee in like a paper filter into some sort of like decanter or cup if you want to, the coarser the grind, the less time the water is going to make contact with all the coffee. And so at the end of it, the water's not going to have a whole lot of contact with the coffee, and it's going to be really quick, and it's going to just taste kind of watery and thin. Whereas on the opposite end, if it's too finely ground, like espresso grind, which is supposed to have like mechanical pressure against it to force water through it, if you just pour hot water over it, it's going to probably take a long time. It may also.
It's almost like a thick filter.
It may not pass through, but the end quality is probably going to be less coffee because of like the water not being able to flow through it.
Unless you let it sit for a while and then gravity
unless it's too fine, because then, like I said, it may also be just like sand where it just may hold it. But also, whatever coffee you get out of that is going to be so super saturated. Even just little drops of it may be, because it's had so much that water, just like how dirt filters out imperfections and like makes spring water, the opposite will happen with coffees. As that water's going through, it's causing more and more flavor to go into it, and it's just whatever little bit.
So
you
is
have.
That the French press at the end? Are you pressing the rest of the liquid through it?
So because of that, so you want because you're fully immersing the coffee beans in the water, it has all that time to just sit there and just
leach all those
leach
almost flavor
almost
off the bean.
Steeping it. So again, we're not dealing with like a barrier, like a paper filter. The coffee is in the water from the get go. You scoop the coffee in there, coarsely ground. you pour that hot water over it and just let it sit there and soak for a while. So to be honest, like there's no real pressure involved. The pushing of the French press is just separating those coffee grounds away from the water.
That makes sense.
So again, that was what I was saying the analogy for. Like a coarsely grind coffee works well if you're fully immersing it. The same thing for cold brew. Cold brew is going to be something you're going to let sit for a while. So again, it's going to have time. You're going to have a whole lot of time for that water to make contact with coffee, and you're totally fine. Whereas something like I said, for espresso, for instance, you want that coarsely ground packed really tight because you're going to have like a mechanical, like a actual like bars of pressure, like forcing water through it, extruding it like really quickly. So, it's all different methods.
Do you like iced coffee?
I'm more of a fan of cold brew, but
See, Miranda likes that. What is it? STOK, Stoke?
Stoke, yeah.
Stoke. Yeah. She loves that.
It's good stuff.
There's probably 10 containers at all times in our refrigerator. I think one whole we have two main shelves in the front refrigerator. Right. One is chocolate and one is Stoke coffee.
Right. So the interesting thing is, like, there's people it's a hot button topic right now, like cold brew coffee. Because companies are branding like iced coffee as cold brew.
Right.
So there's like minor differences, and people like things the way they.
Well, one is you're brewing it cold, and the other one's you're pouring it on ice.
Right, right.
Come on.
Well, and
even my dumb ass gets that.
a lot of times. A lot of times, what I've done is if you're gonna pour.
If I may, Ian, please let me interject here. We do try to offend at least one person an episode, and I think I just might have done that. Go ahead, please.
There is.
Jason is new to the show.
Yeah. I'm still getting the hang of all this.
You'll offend somebody soon.
Don't
worry.
Right.
You'll get a letter.
Yep, I will.
What I do for like iced coffee is I try to like overdo the ratio because I know I'm gonna be pouring it over ice. So a lot of times what I've done is like doubled the amount of grounds.
Is that because maybe the ice dilutes it a little bit 100%. And you want it to be a little stronger?
100%. Especially if you're going now. I mean, if you're taking hot coffee and then just putting it in the fridge and then pouring it over ice, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
But how I've done it is if you're going to be taking hot coffee and then just like throwing ice into it, like you want to make it super strong.
We're learning a lot.
Right. Because it kind of makes sense in a way because again, that ice is going to like cool, melt, and then of course be diluting your super saturated amount. But it's all about ratio. I was telling a story recently about a friend who had a mason jar of coffee that he made that he was wanting me to taste. And he's like, be honest with me, be straightforward. And when I tasted it, it was a little watery, and he kind of described his process. And I was like, his ratio was a certain amount of, it was kind of like old percolated coffee.
Okay.
Where you take a certain amount of like coffee grounds and you let water pass through it and percolate, and you just kind of keep letting that water go, and you keep letting it go until what's an analogy for that? Like it is the flavor of like fresh grounds after it passes through. If you're trying to like re-brew coffee on old grounds, the flavor's not as much as it was before. So if you take old grounds and try and put more hot water on it, it's going to taste probably a little bit weaker than it was before. Right. And the same thing before. You just put more hot water over it, you've already taken the flavor out the first go around. So I told him, if you're going to do X amount of water, do X amount of grounds because of like a ratio that I have.
Okay.
I usually do 60 grams per liter of water, and of course you can like divide it up from there. So he was like a significant more water and kept doing it on old grounds. Long story to say, I was like, try this, which was his, and then I made like a correct ratio that I would like, and then I was like, you can take this and like just double it, so to get the correct amount of water you want, but do a lot more grounds. And of course we made it, and he was like, that tastes so much more lively and stronger, and it has like a more like full-bodied flavor. And I was like, that's what.
So the longer it sits on the grounds, the more flavor it pulls off. Is it kind of like the Devil's Cut whiskey? You're pressing the old, the whiskey out of the barrels.
Yeah.
and it sat in that wood, and it gets you a more earthy, oaky flavor on there. Is it kind of the same thing with the coffee then?
It all kind of depends on your like brewing process.
Okay.
So so if you're going to be doing like just a pour over.
I remember some of the older people used to double percolate their coffee.
Right.
Remember that? They would run it through twice to make it a little bit, what they thought was a little bit stronger.
And it probably was in some way.
And it probably was in some way.
Right. Or it may have been also kind of burning it, which has like a tendency to feel like it's stronger when it's actually...
that and their cigarettes made them
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
And their newspaper in the morning, right?
Twice
Being
cooked
grumpy
coffee.
at each other, right?
You wonder how back you think about how people made coffee, say, 150 years ago.
Right.
I mean, I wonder how that...
That was one of my favorite scenes in a movie, was Dances with Wolves.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they just poured water over...
That's actually...
he had the hand
how did
grinder.
they do that? Do you?
So that's actually it's kind of a contested question, because like there is places in like Persia and in the Middle East and areas where like they have documented like recipes of how I think they used to make coffee and like the idea of it, but there's no at least from what I have learned, and again this is also limited, so I could be very wrong. So
I don't know. He sounds pretty knowledgeable so far, doesn't he?
I'm just taking it all in.
Is that there's no what do you call that? Like patient zero. There's no like
no recorded history of coffee.
Oh yeah, well there's no like one. There's no one guy in history that was like, oh, let me go ahead and grind up these beans and pour water over. Like, there's no one area.
Come on, you gotta think about it like the first guy who ate a crawfish.
You're right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like there's no like, but with I think things like cacao, like hot chocolate, like where there is kind of like a culture of people that did this thing. For coffee, there's not really like that. It's kind of by the time they started like cataloging the idea of it, it had already been kind of like a widespread sort of thing.
So, they have coffee, they grow coffee all over the world, I imagine.
Right. Yeah, there is.
Where is it?
There, I think it's called the Coffee Belt, I think is what it's actually called.
I mean, is it?
I
know down in South America, but I've
looked
heard
it up.
Of India and Africa and...
The earliest credible evidence of coffee drinking or knowledge of the coffee tree appears in the middle of the 15th century in the accounts of Ahmed al-Ghaffar in Yemen. It was there the Arabica seeds were first roasted and brewed in a similar fashion. I like this similar fashion to how it is now.
Right.
So it seems right around the equator.
So that's exactly what it is. It's all about climate. You want
elevation too.
You want elevation, but you also want cool nights, warm days.
Yep, that's ideal growing conditions.
Right. So that's the thing, is that once you have like the warm days, to like make the nibs grow, and the cool nights to have them like rest, and like it's a whole lot of stuff like that. So that this is that kind of, now obviously,
and you said the equator, so it's pretty close.
Well, I'm looking at that. You're looking at a map of that. I mean, there's a lot of rich.
And again, you'll see
foliage in those areas.
Right. You're right, but as you can tell, like there's even like Colombian coffee is really big, Costa Rican coffee, El Salvador. There's a whole bunch of places in like Brazil and stuff.
Yeah, you get a little too further south, and it starts getting a little too cold.
There's actually even like way out in here. There's places in Hawaii that make really interesting coffee and very very different, and just I'll
have to try some different coffees.
Wasn't it? Isn't there a legend? There was a goat herder that invented coffee or did something with the beans first. Wasn't it a goat herder? I think I heard a story 100 years ago about a goat herder that invented coffee.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Or invented a new way of making coffee. I wouldn't, there's hundreds of stories. I don't know them.
We'll update you listeners if it's true. If it's not, then I just put my foot in my mouth.
Right.
Let us know. Comments below. Please let us know if you heard that story.
I do love coffee. I drink it every morning, but I really don't get too picky.
Right.
Well, are we inspiring you now to maybe indulge and try some new stuff?
I would like to actually take a course on coffees, and I was planning to do that several years ago when I was going through a lot of different wine classes.
Yeah, wine's another one I want to get more involved in.
I've taken several wine courses many years ago. And I remember they were offering a coffee course. I said, that would be interesting just to get a kind of a better appreciation of that, because a lot of these things you're not going to try unless you're exposed to them.
That's right.
It's same with wines or whiskeys, or you can kind of go across the gamut.
That's how
you get exposed to that stuff.
This past year, I have been trying my hand at different champagnes, just like because I liked the flavor of it, of like actual champagne. I know there's like some from California, and there's some from sparkling wine. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there's some sparkling wine. There's differences, but I do like champagne from Champagne, France. And
but again, that comes down to the water they use. The earth that they grow the grapes on, and
also the method of making it.
Method that
have you ever been to a winery?
No.
Have you, Stoney?
Yes, I have.
Which one?
There was a place I used to go. We don't tell everybody exactly where we live, but we're in South Louisiana. But there was a Jackson winery in Jackson, Louisiana. I used to stay at the old Centenary Inn, and they would do wine and cheese tasting on Saturdays. Fun. And it was an award-winning winery, and I hated when they shut down.
Bummer.
But man, they had some great wines there. The Jackson Winery.
Jackson Winery, okay.
Yeah, it was closed down. It was for sale a couple of years ago, and I was going, "Why I can't win the lottery now?"
I've been to a few wineries in California. One day I was up there several years ago on a conference, and I took a few extra days vacation when the conference ended. And I was able to go to see several wineries, and of course, you wouldn't bib too much.
Oh, right,
and it was some incredible stuff. But I mean, I would think it'd be fascinating to go see a coffee plantation.
Yeah,
I think it would be cool to see that.
It's really interesting.
There's so many different varieties of coffee.
Yeah,
you have instant coffee, you have just different things. Maxwell House, you just put a cup, you put a spoonful in your cup and stirred it and drank it. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. So what's your favorite? If you're going to have a standby, if you just got one cup of coffee, what are you going to do today?
I like more medium to dark roast, French press.
French press.
Yeah. It's like, that's like kind of my go-to.
Is there a coffee brand? South Louisiana is Community Coffee.
Right, you're right. That's Community Coffee is good.
Arabica
beans, yeah. There's there's another. A lot of people use Arabica beans because it's kind of the standard.
Right.
But I'm there's a handful of other like boutique brands of like coffee that I've had that are really good. But like one that you can. That is not bad, that it is like readily available everywhere, is like Starbucks coffee in the store. Like you can almost I can always get like a bag of whole beans or like a bag of pre-ground and like make pretty consistent results with it. Like at least that's what I've noticed personally. But there's some other brands out there that are good that I've tried at least. But
there's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there.
I'm going to throw a bone out of a local brand. It's called River Road.
Yeah, you're right.
They make a very good. I know the owners.
I have a friend of mine. All he drinks is Black Rifle Coffee Company coffee.
You're right.
That's all he drinks.
I have not had Black Rifle.
That's it.
Coffee.
It's modeled after a Black Rifle. It's kind of crazy. But when you think about now how people love their coffee and they want to do it in their home, I have a K-cup thing. And there's so many different varieties. There's some people that like the wedding cake coffee, and I keep that in there because there's a couple people in the office that drink that, and I can't stand it. But there's a donut shop one.
You're right.
And that's popular. So what changes when you go to Waffle House or different, McDonald's has their own coffee, and people love that coffee. Is it just what they get used to?
It's actually a good coffee.
It is a good coffee, but is it something you just get used to, or
it's a number of things. These are that's kind of like a forked topic.
Okay.
Because like the Keurig thing, we'll get back to that in a second because I have a whole lot to talk about when it comes to that. But when it comes to places like McDonald's and Starbucks and like Waffle House, for instance, the big thing that I can say, especially for like corporations, is like making it easy for workers to make it, like making the process easy, repeatable, and consistent. It may not be, McDonald's may not be the best coffee in the world, but the thing is, it's always consistent.
Okay, that's big.
That's the thing. Is like if you go to a coffee shop or you go to a place and again, because coffee intrinsically, because of if the ratios are different, or if the brewing temperature is different, or if the barista makes it a little different, like things can get shifted and not taste the same. Whereas like if you have like one way of making coffee, if McDonald's makes coffee one way and it's hot and fresh every morning on the hour, like that kind of thing, and they have like a certain ratio they always follow, it's hard to mess up, and it's always going to be a decent cup of coffee. Is kind of
that makes sense, right? Because McDonald's has their own formula for Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah.
They have their own formula.
They have their own formula.
Yes, it's contracted with Coca-Cola, and they have their own formula. That's why it tastes so good on ice in the drinks, because they have their own formula. I don't know what they tweak
Supposedly,
in it.
They also store the syrup. They refrigerate the syrup,
right?
They
do that. They just do. It's that ratio and process that you want it consistent each time, and you kind of get used to something.
That's one thing that at the coffee shop that I worked at, that customers appreciated the most whenever I was working the bar. They never told me this intrinsically, but I could always like sniff it out, is that I knew how to make their cup of coffee the same way every time each morning.
For them.
Mm-hmm. So whenever I wasn't there, they're like, it just wasn't the same. I don't know why. And I was like, that's understandable. Don't worry. I can fix it for you or whatever. And it's like that kind of, there is a method, there's a ratio, and I'm also kind of a perfectionist. So whenever you're like, oh, everything has to be just this way, I was like, oh, perfect. I will replicate that 100 times.
So when you have somebody that cares about the job and they care about that process,
right,
they're going to be a little bit more consistent. But if you get somebody that really doesn't care what they do or doesn't care what the customer wants,
or it gets really busy. I know sometimes like coffee shops and places or McDonald's can get really busy and things happen.
I had a friend of mine. His name is Vernon Roger. He was a news guy on the Noon News in South Louisiana, and he did a cooking segment. But he always said, why can you do a recipe the same as your grandmother and it never tastes the same?
Right.
Because you forgot one ingredient. Do you know what it is?
No.
Love.
I was going to say,
it's a very tangible ingredient when you're cooking or doing coffee or doing what you love. You love coffee.
Yeah.
And if you pay somebody just to come in and do a job and they really don't love it, they're not going to be consistent.
Right.
They're not going to care what that customer wants, and it's not
going
to
to
be
the
same.
passion.
They lack the passion.
Well, and it's always, it's with most things in life. The second like you really put care and attention into something, even if it may not be tangible like the love ingredient or whatever, but it is like there is a certain level of intention to it.
Sure.
That is,
Oh yeah, you're going to be more careful in how you do every little aspect of that.
So now to kind of, we're going to take like a little detour, but come back to this main point. Hear me out.
Squirrel.
So yeah, right. So to go back to that Keurig thing you were talking about, the K-Cup, I understand the love for a Keurig because it's instant, it's
convenient.
Quick, it's convenient.
That's the biggest thing.
You're right.
Convenient society.
And that's what I'm saying, is that for me, like, this is where I'm really going to probably offend some people out there, and I'm okay with it.
Go ahead and offend.
Go ahead and offend. It is, I'm all for convenience. I'm all for quick, concise things. I understand that. But sometimes I have to ask myself, like, what is the purpose here? And a lot of times I do drink coffee in the morning times to kind of help wake me up. But I also enjoy the taste and the process of making coffee.
Okay.
So like with a Keurig machine, it's or something equivalent to it. I understand the place that it is, but sometimes like don't just know that it feels like you're drinking coffee for a purpose at that point. Like that's what it feels like.
Almost
to me.
Feels like you're cheating
a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like, so for me, like you can enjoy that. You can have that cup of coffee and enjoy it, but also know that there is like there's a time and place for everything.
Okay.
There's a setting for it. And there's probably better coffee out there. And if you want to drink that and that's all you want, that's fine. But just know that there's also other things out there as well, and it's not super hard to do. And if you just put a little bit of work and time and love into something, you can make it really great.
I can see where this is going, right?
What do you mean?
We're going to have to do Facebook Lives and have Ian demonstrate how
Exactly.
to make coffee,
man.
because everybody's going to want to know what this
Right.
process is that he has.
Right.
So, listeners, get ready.
Yeah.
I can see
it's coming.
Facebook Live coming, and
Okay, got it.
get ready.
Yeah.
Coffee demo.
Yeah.
In 1,
Yeah.
2.
But there's just like me saying that as well. What I've learned in my own life is adjusting your expectation for like what you're getting.
Okay.
So I talk to the people that may just drink coffee for a purpose and just like the K-cups and all that kind of stuff, which is totally fine. It's coffee and whiskey and wine and whatever else. I live by the motto, it's what you like to drink, the way you like to drink it, the way you like to make it. You can do it, and you can, as long as you're enjoying it and you're having fun with it, then that's great. That's perfect for you. And now I'm going to talk to the people on the other end of the spectrum that are a little too uppity and snooty, in that it's okay to have coffee at a Waffle House.
Sure.
It's okay to have K-cup coffee. It may not be perfect, it may not be great, but at the same time, adjust your expectations. If I'm going to go, I'm just going to use the Waffle House analogy, because I've used this in the past.
I love Waffle House.
I love Waffle House too. I love that it's a little dirty, and it is a breakfast place.
Extra flavor.
I mean, I'm just saying, it's like the thing is, it's like, I know for a fact that I probably will get somebody who will talk to me and who will have a fun time. I usually always go later at night anyways if I do go. But I adjust my expectation for what I'm going to get. If I go to Waffle House and I'm going to get a cup of coffee, you better believe it's not going to be a great cup of coffee, but it's going to be hot, and it's going to be all right. And if it cools down, it may not be very good after a certain period of time. But also, I know that going into it.
Sure.
If I go into like a 5-star coffee bar and I get served Waffle House coffee, I'm going to be offended.
Well, your expectations are different.
Right.
Exactly. If you're going to go into a Starbucks and you pay for like a nice latte that's expensive, and you get something that's not that, it's understandable. So that's just what I'm saying. Same thing with like McDonald's. If I go there and I get this coffee and it's like, something that I'm not expecting, it's like, okay, well, that's how I've always looked at it. So
For me, that's what's fun, is because people love McDonald's
You're
coffee,
right.
and they love Waffle House coffee. To
Right.
them,
Convenience, it's good, and it's hot, and that's what most people are looking for.
And you'd be surprised, a lot of times super cold and super hot hides a lot of crimes. People don't know that. So if you get your coffee and it's not quite perfect, but it's super hot, a lot of times, like here's another analogy: gas station coffee. If you ever had gas station coffee, you'll drink it, and the first few sips, you're like, it's okay, it's decent. But as it cools off, you're like, man, this is really shitty.
Yeah, it's bad coffee.
Yeah. And that's because the extreme temperature really does hide a lot of the crimes. Because after it cools down, that's always been the flavor of the coffee, but it was just being hidden a little bit.
Well, your taste buds were numb
right.
because it was burning your tongue.
Right.
I remember it was a Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Right.
As a kid,
Yeah.
drank it a lot when I would go eat donuts with my parents.
Well, you're mixing it with sugar and
yeah, it was all
everything else.
good.
It's great.
And that's another thing that like I was interested in coffee, but was never really, I wouldn't say I was very well educated when I started working for like as a barista at a coffee place. The manager I was like part of like the onboarding process. There was a coffee tasting, and she did it so well. I'm still so happy and like about how she handled it. It was super good. She gave me a dark roast, a medium roast, and a light roast. No sugar, no cream, and nothing. And we paired it with like a food. And the two that I remember specifically was she had a chocolate muffin for the dark roast, and then like a lemon bread, like a lemon loaf for the light roast. And she was like, drink the coffee, kind of feel it around, tell me what you're feeling with it, and then take a bite of this pastry, whatever it may be, fully chew it, fully get it down, and then take another sip of it, and then tell me what you and at that time I thought, whenever she had it all laid out, I was like, oh, we're gonna be in my mind I was like, oh, we're gonna be like wine and cheese, all uppity, because at that time I had never really had wine and cheese either, or paired anything like that. And then I sat down and had this dark roast, and it was like really strong, full-bodied, and it was like heavy. A word they use in the coffee world is like mouthfeel. Had very full mouthfeel. I took a bite of this chocolate, and I felt like it opened it all up. And I was like, oh my gosh, it feels so much more rich and rounded. I tried this light roast, had some of this like lemon loaf, drank it, and I was like, and it had this like this peanut quality to it. And I was like, it was so interesting. And I never had anything like that before. It had an experience where I was like, I was drinking. The medium roast had a really interesting experience too, but the ones that were on the two opposite ends of the spectrum were the ones that really surprised me. And so it's things like that as well. Like, you can have good coffee, pair it with something that probably makes it taste weird.
Where do you go get your coffee at?
I mean, anywhere.
Do you
really.
order it online, or do you go to a store to actually buy it?
The best stuff is to kind of really order it online. But you can get like you can get really good results from stuff at the store. A really key thing is, this is where more uppity people may say this, is if it says a best by date, it's probably like mass produced and, just,
oh wow!
But if it has
another thing we learned,
if it has like, so if it uses like best sell by or best by date, it's probably been roasted a long time ago. But the best, freshest coffee is whenever ones that say like roasted on date.
Oh, wow.
So if you get like a roasted on, that it's been like roasted recently. So again, like you're kind of chasing like the freshest of the freshest. Wow. So a lot of times people will freeze beans. Mm-hmm. I would recommend freezing whole beans, but don't freeze already ground beans. It's not.
Man.
It's not really worth it.
It sounds like once again we did an episode a while back on an experience with food.
Yes.
And it sounds like, again, when we're talking about whiskey or cigars or now coffee or food, it's all about the experience.
Right. It is.
That's why interesting.
You asked me recently, just earlier today.
That would be Jason.
Oh yeah. Sorry. You asked me, do I always do like pour over? And I was like, no, I don't do it. I personally like French press more, but the kind of coffee that I have is already ground for paper filter, and it also just has like a nicer experience. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, I had my mom, I had my brothers over, and we were all done with food. We're still talking. We're planning on going to Disney in about a year or so, so we're going to be like talking about the trip, having a moment, and I was like, does anybody want tea or coffee? And then everyone was like, yeah, we'll have some coffee. So I brought out my big pour over pitcher, and I had the water heated, and as we're all talking, I'm like making this coffee, and everyone's smelling it. It's right there on the table. You're watching it be brewed. My brother's cracking a joke because he's like, oh, here Ian comes with his kettle. But then we're all sitting here in this moment talking over this this wonderful smell of coffee being made in this dining room area. And then I pour it all out for everyone. And then, like I said, the brother that, of course, obviously was kind of poking fun at me, I was like, is it good? He's like, man, this is so good. This is the best coffee I've had in a while. And I was like, thank you. Because it's like moments like that I think really.
Do you do cream and sugar or anything, or just plain black?
It depends. One thing that people don't always don't realize is cream. Cream helps outweigh like bitter qualities.
Okay.
Sugar helps cut on acidic qualities. So just know so sometimes if I have a cup of coffee and it's like really acidic and kind of like harsh, I may put a little bit of sugar in it just to help cut. But traditionally, no, I don't really. I kind of just like it.
Because I've heard that's the best way to drink coffee as far as the healthiest.
Right,
strictly black coffee. When the minute you introduce cream or sugar.
Right. Again, it also depends on the place. So again, if I'm going,
it has more antioxidants.
Probably so.
Yeah.
If I go to a place where I can't control the outcome, like if someone's just going to make like a community coffee pot and it's just going to be a big old batch of coffee, I may do a little bit because again, I can't really control the ratios and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm making it from home and I really can get the flavor the way I want it to, where it's not too acidic, it's not too strong or bitter, it's just the way I like it. A lot of times I'll drink it black because again, I'm obviously like really I have my ratios down. I know a little bit of this, and I can really fine tune it.
I've gotten to just drink coffee black. I put maybe a little pack of Splenda in it.
Mm-hmm,
That'd be about it.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing. It's all about what you like.
I got an experience I want to share with y'all.
Okay, go ahead.
When I was young, my dad's family was from the city and my mom's family was from the country. And it was really cool to go to Grandma and Grandpa's. They were the country folk, and we would go. And Grandpa was a really early riser, called him Pawpaw. He would wake us up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he would give us 1, 2, 3 cups of coffee, as much sugar in it as we wanted.
Okay.
And he would feed us a bowl or 2 of Product 19 cereal with as much sugar on it as we wanted.
Oh, yeah. I think I've heard this story, yeah.
He would put us back in the bed, and he would go do his day. He would start working in the yard or working or whatever was going on, and Grandma would get up, and she would cook us this full spread breakfast, and she could never understand why we weren't hungry. She would do the whole works, eggs, bacon, biscuits, everything. And we're like, we're not hungry. But that was my first experience with coffee, was with Pawpaw, sitting there in South Louisiana, just sitting there sipping on the coffee. And it was so cool. I don't even know if it was good coffee, but it was the old percolator.
Yeah.
And just sitting there with Pawpaw drinking a cup of coffee.
That's very similar to.
I love that.
My father was an early riser, and that's how he'd wake my sister and I up for school.
Oh, yeah?
It was coffee milk, though.
Yeah, yeah.
It's coffee milk, and it just. So, yeah, a lot of fond memories of coffee. So I've been a coffee drinker since as far as back as I can imagine.
Right.
So
that's interesting. And I it's stuff like that, too. And it even, like... There's even stories back when I remember my dad used to do the same sort of thing. He used to like load up some cream and sugar in like little styrofoam cups of coffee, same sort of thing, like really coffee milk. And I remember having that as a kid and going, "Oh, this is so nice." Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's, like I said, there's I whatever kind of way you like to make coffee. However,
what is your favorite coffee? I mean, what region of the world do you prefer to draw your coffee from?
South American's really nice. There was some places in. It's easier for me to say that I don't really like African coffee. I really can drink everything else, but there's some places there's some African coffees that have a very specific flavor that is just not my favorite. Other than that, I'm really kind of down for all of it. I like more kind of chocolatey notes, more kind of full-bodied coffee. But the
what kind of flavors are the African coffees?
They have a more floral, kind of earthy qualities to them, and sometimes a little more acidic than other ones. So again, they can be nice, and you can brew them right. And again, they're not bad by any means. I still will drink it and probably enjoy it. But of all the flavors that are not my favorite, the East Asian, kind of African area, it kind of gets into that kind of floral territory.
What about India?
Kind of a little bit different, but kind of the same in that kind of that part
Floral,
of the world. Has or earthy is another big one. Earthy kind of,
kind of like a mineral, a deep mineral taste to
and
it.
It's just not my favorite. But yeah, it is a hobby in and of itself. Hopefully this Christmas I'm going to get myself an espresso machine, so we're going to really elevate my whole game here.
Well, that's one of my favorite desserts is tiramisu.
Oh yeah. I love tiramisu.
Yeah. Oh man, you take those little cookies and soak them in the espresso.
And while we're talking about this too, is like I'm hoping this year I have a hot chocolate recipe that I'm like really wanting to like get nailed down and like really try. So again, talking about like getting good items to put in the drink, and of course, obviously, like making it and the whole process of making it, and like really refining it. I'm really excited about it. So hopefully this year we'll have a good hot chocolate recipe though, as well. So talking about drinks and stuff and holidays.
Podcast have to come over and have some of that.
Yeah. Huh? So yeah, there's a handful of stuff. So, but yeah.
I'll tell you what. I have a coffee pot at my house that I use. It's called the Mocha Master. By Technovarm. It's actually made in the Netherlands.
Wow.
I got it as a gift from William Sonoma.
Oh, yeah.
And I tell you what, it brews some really good coffee.
I bet.
Okay.
That's really good.
Really good coffee.
I love the idea, too. It's just like whenever I was making that, like, chocolate chip cookie recipe, I love the idea of, like, fine-tuning like, exactly what you want. Is like... one day I will have to have you guys over for like an actual coffee tasting.
I'd love to do that.
Where I make a handful of them
would think
of
that would be
different
cool.
kinds, because it's just like wine tasting. It's hard. It's hard to put words to flavors in a vacuum where you don't have any context for anything else, which is why I started doing it with champagne. I was like, I like this, but I don't know why I like it. And then, of course, when I tried this other one, I was like, I don't like this one, but I don't like it. I don't really know why. And so it's things like that where I was able to, especially with coffee as well. It's like if you have, you like 2 or 3 of them, and you can A, B it. And that's why it was the friend that I was talking about in the earlier part of the episode. He had his brew right there, and he tried the new one, and he was like, "Oh, I can almost visibly tell the difference." And I could sit here and go, "This one does taste too watery,"
right.
But it tasted normal to him. But whenever I did, I was like, there are some things you can do here to kind of make it a little bit different. The same sort of thing is you can taste like different roasts of coffee, different preparations of coffee, and you can really like nail it down and go like, I like this kind of bean, and I like it made this way.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes from really trying. And I, again, working as a barista for like 4 or 4.5 years, I really had just like the floor in front of me to like, try my hand at different things and mess up and,
Do you grind your beans?
I do. Not all the time, but, it again kind of depends on what you have. It's really cheap and easy to get just like freshly ground, or not freshly ground, but like already pre-ground coffee that I have used in the past. That the office that I work at has like pre-ground coffee, so I can just use that and it's fine. It's not perfect, and again, I know that people will probably be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you don't do that."
Hey, I figured you're the type of person who grinds there.
I do. Again, I'm getting an espresso machine, so I'm getting a new grinder that can like really set in a certain grind for certain things. So I think once I do that, I may grind my coffee more because I'll have a really nice one. Right now, I have kind of a cheap grinder, so it's hard to like it's not as fun to grind the coffee fresh like that. So, but once you have
you need to get one of those from like the Western days where you have to hand grind it yourself.
You joke, but they've made some new ones that are really nice and easy that are that are actually like.
Well, that was the scene in Dances with Wolves that I was talking about.
Okay,
when he meets the Indians, he's sitting there with this hand grinder, and he makes the coffee for them, and they're like, and he throws sugar in it. And they all go crazy over the sugar. That's one of my favorite scenes in a movie. So
that was a great movie.
No, that was. You got to see. Okay, Mr. Wolf.
Okay.
You have to see the director's cut. It adds almost 40 minutes to it.
Oh, wow.
And it changes the complexity. It changes a whole bunch in the movie.
Wow.
But that is a great movie. I love that movie. And that's one of my favorite scenes in it.
Okay, yeah.
It's just the simple coffee scene as food and coffee are just universal languages.
Yeah.
So
they have some really nice, I'm telling you, like it sounds kind of cheesy to say, but like right now, the past couple of years ago, and even right now, we're like really in this new renaissance of coffee, especially over in England and around here as well. It's like, it's just really blowing up. There's a whole, you can really not only learn so much on the internet, but also you can get all kinds of really great equipment that used to be not so great, even like 5-10 years ago, that are now like, even like there's new hand grinders that are super good, that are, a lot better than they were before. So yeah.
All righty.
Okay.
That was interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad I was able to.
Considering we were going in a different direction when we sat down. And but I like that. That's
kind of random, just come up with an idea.
Able to pivot pretty well.
So are you liking this so far? Are you liking the whole really podcast thing?
This is I dived into this podcast. Didn't really know what to expect, and it's sometimes
Is it meeting your expectations now?
Yeah, it definitely is. I like the idea of just talking about different things, and I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to cover a bunch of different topics, and some things will be random, some things will be planned.
Like tonight.
Exactly.
This was as random as it comes.
I think some a little more surface level, some a little more deep.
I'm excited. I really am. I think this is I think this podcast is going to be very successful.
I do too. I like the way this episode happened.
Yeah.
Because we're just sitting here. I keep picking on Ian about we need to record our pre and post cast.
Right.
And our pre-cast, we were just three of us just sitting here, and boom, it just exploded in our face and said, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So our next episode is going to be how friends have influenced us.
Right.
And that was going to be tonight's episode. So look forward to that one next week, because I kind of told some people that's what we were going to do. So please bear with us.
Stay tuned, everyone.
Yes. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. You know, like I said before, I by no means am I any sort of coffee master. Or I don't have any.
I don't know.
I think
I learned enough tonight that we could call you a coffee master. So
I would like to do a coffee tasting. I think that would be fun.
Right. It is I have learned a pretty good amount, but I don't have any awards or credentials or anything.
Facebook Live coffee tasting.
That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, we could definitely make that happen. I can get you
right.
you get a handful of coffees you want to try, and I'll prepare them all for you, and we can sit here and
Kopi Luwak.
Oh gosh, please no! I don't want to try. I don't want to support animal abuse. So that doesn't sound good to me at all.
That was still funny in the movie, though, right?
You're right. It is.
We just grab some different coffees from around the world.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
If we can get like 4 of them, that's like a good little flight.
Will we be pairing them with pastries?
We can. We can if you want to. That'd be really cool. Or even with food. I just recently had I had some sort of dinner. I think it was like macaroni and cheese or something, and I tried it with some tea. And it was like, I don't know, it was so weird, but I enjoyed it so much. Mm-hmm. I was like, of all the things that I thought would pair with this was not the one. But hey, it's good.
Okay.
So, anyways. All right. If you're looking to contact us or try and give us suggestions or just talk to us and give us some feedback on the show, you can go to facebook.com/retrospectpod, or you can type in linktree/retrospectpod as well and find all the places that we host this podcast, or other ways you can get in contact with us. But anyways, until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone, and God bless.
Peace.